Hey guys! Today we're diving into another truly horrifying case. If you want to support my channel, make sure to subscribe and stay active. It really helps me out. I'd be super grateful for that. Let's get started. Close relationships are not always defined by family ties. In fact, sometimes the opposite is true. Immediate relatives can become bitter enemies, with minor family disagreements escalating into full-blown conflicts. Such hostility can persist for years and even be passed down through generations. The mysterious disappearance of Russell and Rebecca Porter from their own home was deeply alarming and suspicious from the very beginning. It was clear they couldn't have simply left without saying a word to anyone, leaving behind all their personal belongings. Moreover, the disorder inside the house pointed to signs of a struggle, as if someone had tried to cover up evidence of a brutal altercation. However, the real shock came when the truth about what had happened, and who was behind it, finally came to light. You might find yourself stunned as well. In the summer of 2010, Russell and Rebecca Porter moved to the small, picturesque town of Willard, Missouri, after Russell inherited a large farmhouse from his grandfather. The town was a quiet, rural area with a low crime rate, friendly neighbors, and a welcoming atmosphere. However, this peaceful impression would soon prove deceiving. On April 19, 2011, 46-year-old Rebecca failed to show up for work. She hadn't informed anyone of an absence, and her no-show was highly unusual. Calls to her phone went unanswered throughout the day. While her co-workers found this strange, they initially avoided jumping to conclusions, assuming there was some reasonable explanation and waiting for Rebecca to contact them herself. Around 9:30 a.m., a neighbor noticed Rebecca's car parked in front of the house. This seemed odd, as she typically left for work by 9 a.m. Curious, the neighbor decided to knock on the Porter's door to check on them, but there was no response. Assuming the car might have broken down, he guessed that Russell may have driven Rebecca to work and thought little of it. By 1 p.m., Rebecca's daughter Jessica arrived at the house. Concerned after being unable to reach her mother, Jessica decided to drive over and check in person. Around the same time, Rebecca's son Stephen, who had left work early, also showed up, worried about the lack of contact with both his mother and stepfather. Jessica and Stephen walked around the house, peering through the windows. They immediately noticed a significant mess inside and saw that the mosquito screen on one of the large windows had been cut. The window itself was open. Alarmed, they called law enforcement right away but refrained from entering the home themselves. When police arrived and entered the house, they were hit by the strong smell of cleaning products containing chlorine. The interior was in disarray, with belongings scattered across the floor. The master bedroom was in complete chaos. Signs of a violent struggle were apparent. The mattress had been shifted, a nightstand was overturned, a flower pot and a framed photo were shattered on the ground. However, there was no trace of Russell or Rebecca in the house, leaving a faint hope that they might still be alive. In the bedroom, the odor of bleach was overwhelming. The mattress and carpet had been thoroughly saturated with the chemical, and small puddles of it had collected on the floor. This appeared to be a desperate attempt to eliminate evidence, but until the scene could be properly examined and tested, no definitive conclusions could be drawn. The initial theory was that the crime stemmed from a burglary gone wrong. Investigators determined that an intruder, or possibly multiple intruders, had entered the home through an open window after cutting through the mosquito screen. The assumption was that the intruder planned to steal valuables, but was confronted by the homeowners, leading to a violent struggle. However, this theory quickly unraveled due to several inconsistencies. First, all valuable items and cash were left untouched, despite being in plain sight. Second, the house showed no signs of a search. Most of the scattered objects appeared to have been knocked over during the altercation. Lastly, the biggest mystery remained. What had happened to Russell and Rebecca Porter? Rebecca's purse was found on the bedroom floor, still containing her wallet, keys, and bank cards. Her phone lay nearby, its screen shattered, as though someone had stepped on it. A prescription bottle belonging to Russell was also discovered on the floor. According to Rebecca's daughter, Jessica, Russell relied on this medication daily due to a chronic health condition and rarely left the house without it. The only missing item appeared to be the tower of the family's desktop computer, which had been forcibly removed along with its cables. Law enforcement speculated that this might have been the intruder's primary target, perhaps containing valuable information that could provide access to financial accounts or be used for blackmail. However, this theory was soon dismissed. According to Rebecca's children, the hard drive didn't contain anything of the sort, but it did store other critical data, namely footage from the home's extensive surveillance system, which included over a dozen cameras. As it turned out, the entire Porter property was under constant surveillance, with no blind spots. Whoever entered the house had been recorded, and it was evident that the intruder knew this. By removing the computer, they eliminated the primary piece of evidence. This raised another unsettling question. Who, or what, had the Porters feared so much that they installed such a comprehensive security system? With no clear direction for the investigation, authorities turned their focus to Russell and Rebecca themselves, attempting to learn more about the couple. What they uncovered painted a picture of a relationship that was both recent and unusual. Rebecca had just celebrated her 46th birthday. She had previously been married and had 2 adult children from that relationship. Russell, on the other hand, was nearly 12 years younger than Rebecca. He had never been married and didn't have any children. Russell had struggled with severe issues in the past, including substance abuse. He had a long history of alcohol dependence and the use of prohibited substances, which he had relied on heavily for years. He had attended rehab several times, but had repeatedly relapsed. Despite his troubled past, Rebecca became a stabilizing force in Russell's life. She not only accepted him as he was, but actively helped him turn his life around. With her support, Russell agreed to enter a treatment program one more time, and this time he completed it successfully. Free from his addictions, Russell proposed to Rebecca, and she happily accepted. Despite Rebecca's role in helping Russell turn his life around, his family was far from thrilled about their marriage. They were openly critical of Rebecca, largely due to the significant age difference between her and Russell, and the fact that she had children from a previous marriage. On the other hand, Rebecca's children initially found it difficult to connect with their much younger stepfather, unsure of how to relate to him. However, over time, they grew closer and even developed a friendly relationship. About 6 months after their wedding, the couple decided to leave the city of Springfield, the county seat where they had previously lived, and move to Willard. Russell had recently inherited a farmhouse from his grandfather, and the two of them chose to trade the busy city life for the peace and quiet of a rural town. In Willard, the couple quickly became part of the local community. They were friendly, helpful, and well-liked by their neighbors. Both devoutly religious, they attended church every Sunday and were known for their charitable efforts. Neighbors described them as kind, compassionate, and always ready to lend a helping hand. On the surface, it seemed they had no enemies, but this turned out to be far from the truth. According to neighbors, after Russell's grandfather passed away, his younger brother, Rob Campbell, moved into the farmhouse. Rob, despite the existence of a clear will leaving the property entirely to Russell, believed he was entitled to half of the inheritance. He was also convinced that Russell would never leave the city for a quiet, rural life. Rob and his wife took it upon themselves to move into the house. They began remodeling and redecorating it to their liking, even though they had no legal claim to the property. When Russell finally arrived to claim his inheritance and asserted his legal ownership, Rob refused to leave. Evicting him required police intervention and court orders. Angered and humiliated, Rob filed a lawsuit in an attempt to claim half of the house and land. The court rejected his case, citing the will that left everything to Russell. Undeterred, Rob filed another lawsuit, this time demanding compensation for the money he claimed to have spent on renovations and remodeling. Once again, the court ruled against him, stating that his actions were unauthorized and had not been approved by the property's rightful owner. This series of legal defeats escalated into a bitter feud. Rob began harassing Russell and Rebecca, frequently showing up uninvited and demanding a share of the inheritance. His behavior grew increasingly hostile, with him cursing the couple, making threats, and insisting they wouldn't live in the house for long. Things quickly escalated from verbal threats to outright acts of aggression. The windows of the Porters' home were repeatedly broken during the night, their vehicles were vandalized, and in a particularly cruel act, their dog was poisoned. Feeling unsafe, Russell and Rebecca sought help from the authorities. Although there was no concrete evidence directly tying Rob to these incidents, witness statements from the Porters and their neighbors painted a clear picture of his aggressive behavior. The court ultimately issued a restraining order forbidding Rob from approaching Russell, Rebecca, or their home. About a month before the mysterious disappearance of Russell and Rebecca Porter, someone broke onto their property in the middle of the night and stole expensive farming equipment and tools. Although there was no solid evidence linking Rob Campbell to the theft, the Porters became increasingly concerned about their safety. In response, they installed numerous surveillance cameras around their home, ensuring full coverage of the property. Once these details came to light, Rob immediately became the prime suspect. Investigators located him and brought him in for questioning to learn more about his ongoing conflict with the missing couple and to determine if he had any involvement in their disappearance. The elderly relative adamantly denied having anything to do with Russell and Rebecca's disappearance, though he couldn't hide his satisfaction at hearing about the troubling situation. Rob openly admitted to his long-standing disputes with the Porters, acknowledging the bitter conflict over the inheritance. However, he insisted that he never wished them harm and only wanted, in his words, justice in the family property dispute. Rob provided a solid alibi for the night of the disappearance. He and his wife had left the day before for a farm equipment expo in a nearby city and stayed there for 3 days. His wife confirmed this account, adding that her husband was a good man who, despite past disagreements, had hoped to reconcile with the Porters and settle their disputes amicably. With no evidence directly implicating him, investigators had no grounds to press charges against Rob. Although some speculated that he might have hired someone else to carry out the dirty work, there was no proof to support this theory. As a result, Rob was cleared of suspicion and released. Detectives expanded their investigation, looking deeper into the lives of the missing couple and considering other people who might have had reasons to harm them. This led them to Rebecca's ex-husband, Terrence, who was also the father of her 2 children. Rebecca and Terrence had been married for 18 years, during which they accumulated significant shared assets. Among their holdings was a profitable restaurant business they had co-owned for many years. When the couple divorced, the restaurant became the main point of contention. Neither Rebecca nor Terrence was willing to sell their share, and neither wanted to give up control of the business. Despite being divorced for over 2.5 years, they had continued running the restaurant together, frequently clashing over decisions. While their disagreements sometimes flared up, they generally maintained a professional relationship for the sake of their family. Both, however, still harbored hopes of one day owning the business outright. When police arrived at Terrence's house, he appeared caught off guard. After officers explained why they were there, his initial confusion turned to visible shock and distress. Terrence insisted that he would never harm the mother of his children and denied having anything to do with her disappearance or that of her husband. Unlike Rob, who had displayed smugness during questioning, Terrence broke down in tears, appearing genuinely devastated by the situation. Terrence also had an alibi for the night Rebecca and Russell vanished, but investigators couldn't ignore his potential motive. If Rebecca were to disappear or pass away, Terrence would gain sole ownership of the restaurant by default. Despite this, there was no evidence tying him to the crime. Without proof of involvement, law enforcement had no grounds to arrest him, and Terrence was released. As previously mentioned, the master bedroom in the Porters' home was drenched in chlorine bleach, which had been used extensively throughout the space. However, investigators only found one half-empty bottle of bleach in the house, suggesting that any additional containers had been taken by someone. The cleaning product had clearly been used to destroy evidence, but forensic experts were still able to uncover a few critical traces. Tiny reddish-brown stains were found on the floor, furniture, and walls. Testing confirmed these were traces of blood belonging to Russell Porter. This discovery reinforced investigators' worst fears. The couple was likely no longer alive, but the lingering question remained: who could have done this? Detectives proposed another theory, one that seemed improbable but still plausible enough to investigate. According to this scenario, a domestic dispute between Russell and Rebecca had escalated into a physical altercation. Things turned violent, and the confrontation might have ended in an unintentional killing. This could explain the disarray in the bedroom and the bloodstains. It was suggested that Russell may have attacked Rebecca, leading her to defend herself and injure him in the process, or that Rebecca might have been the aggressor. In either case, one spouse could have attempted to cover up what had happened, disposing of the other's body, taking the surveillance system's hard drive, and possibly fleeing the area. When family members of the Porters heard this theory, they were outraged. They vehemently denied that anything of the sort could have happened, insisting that Russell and Rebecca deeply loved each other and had never fought, let alone engaged in physical aggression. Additionally, they questioned why, if one of them had fled, they hadn't taken any personal belongings, such as phones, bank cards, or Russell's essential medication. The evidence clearly suggested a break-in and foul play by a third party, but the investigation still lacked concrete leads or evidence pointing to a specific direction. 2 weeks after Russell and Rebecca's disappearance, another disturbing crime shook the quiet town of Willard. Police received a frantic call from a man who reported finding his elderly neighbors, Donald and Helena Willingham, brutally killed in their home. When officers arrived at the scene, they discovered the couple had been fatally stabbed in their bedroom. The similarities to the Porter case were immediately apparent. In both instances, the intruder had entered the home at night, catching the victims while they were asleep. In neither case were any valuable items stolen, suggesting that the crimes were driven by personal motives rather than robbery. However, in the Willingham case, the intruder had left the bodies behind and had not attempted to clean up the evidence. The unsettling parallels between the two crimes raised new questions. Could the same person or group have been involved in both cases? And if so, what was their motive? Investigators doubled their efforts, now searching for connections between the two households and any clues that could shed light on who might have been responsible for these heinous acts. Both cases stalled for nearly 3 months, with no new leads until July 2011. That was when law enforcement's attention shifted to a young man named Jose Huckleberry. Jose was an undocumented migrant who traveled between states committing various offenses. He had been caught during a burglary in Arkansas, a state neighboring Missouri. During an extended interrogation, investigators uncovered details of more disturbing crimes connected to him. As it turned out, Jose had broken into the home of Helena and Donald Willingham several months earlier, intending to rob them. However, when Helena raised the alarm, alerting neighbors, Jose panicked and attacked the elderly couple. One neighbor even chased him as he fled the Willingham residence, but was unable to catch him. Jose admitted to the crime, expressing remorse and sharing grisly details about the incident, details that only the perpetrator could know. Despite his confession regarding the Willingham case, Jose adamantly denied any involvement in the disappearance of Russell and Rebecca Porter. He claimed he had no idea who they were, had never been to their home, and had nothing to do with their case. Investigators found no evidence linking him to the Porters' disappearance, and his alibi for the night they went missing was confirmed. As a result, Jose was ruled out as a suspect. In September 2011, a prison informant provided police with a critical lead in the Porter investigation. The informant claimed to have shared a cell with a repeat offender named Tony Hicks, who was in custody for distributing prohibited substances. According to the informant, Tony boasted about killing a farmer and his wife, adding that no one would ever find their bodies. Initially, detectives were skeptical. They suspected Tony was fabricating the story to bolster his reputation in prison. However, the tip couldn't be ignored, so they brought Tony in for questioning. As expected, Tony immediately denied any involvement with the Porters' disappearance, claiming he had nothing to do with the case. Yet his behavior suggested he was uneasy, and investigators felt they might be onto something significant. A request was made to trace the location of Tony's cell phone on the night the Porters vanished. Records revealed that his phone had pinged near their home, but was turned off around 12:30 a.m. This raised further suspicions. Tony had an extensive criminal history, including convictions for burglary, robbery, possession of weapons, and trafficking prohibited substances. He also frequently carried out his crimes with his younger brother, Dusty, who had been incarcerated for several months at the time of the investigation. This new information gave investigators hope that they were finally closing in on answers about what had happened to Russell and Rebecca Porter. During a subsequent interrogation, Dusty decided to cooperate with the police and claimed he had something important to show them. He revealed that his brother, Tony, had a secret location in the woods that concealed a dark truth. Dusty led detectives to a dilapidated old cabin hidden deep in the forest. As they approached, a sickening odor became noticeable, and upon entering, the stench of decay was overwhelming. Inside the cabin, investigators found a shallow cellar beneath the wooden floorboards. Buried under dirt and debris were two heavily decomposed bodies. Detectives suspected the remains belonged to the missing couple, Russell and Rebecca Porter. Given the advanced state of decomposition, more than 4 months had passed since their disappearance. Visual identification was impossible. A DNA analysis was conducted, and it conclusively confirmed that the bodies were indeed those of the Porters. Forensic examination revealed that the couple had been killed by close-range gunshots to the head, likely from a high-caliber weapon. The amount of blood on the wooden floor and walls of the cabin suggested the crime had occurred there. Additionally, Russell had suffered a broken nose and arm, indicating he had put up a fierce struggle in a desperate attempt to protect himself and Rebecca. Tragically, their efforts were no match for their attackers, and the couple paid the ultimate price. With this discovery, the case was officially reclassified from a disappearance to a double homicide. Authorities now had their suspects in custody, but needed to determine the motive and piece together the chain of events to fully understand the crime. The fact that the couple was still in their pajamas suggested they had been ambushed while asleep. But how and why did they end up so far from their home? Dusty insisted he had no direct involvement in the murders. He claimed to have only known about his brother's cabin and heard rumors that bodies might be hidden there, but he wasn't certain. However, the investigation uncovered evidence implicating him as an accomplice. It was revealed that Tony had enlisted not only Dusty's help, but also that of his common-law wife, Wendy, and their 19-year-old son, Philip, all of whom had ties to criminal activity. Cell phone records placed all 4 suspects near the Porters' home on the night of their disappearance. Strikingly, all 4 phones were powered off almost simultaneously, further raising suspicion. Tony, who was aware of the Porters' surveillance system, cut the exterior camera cable. This triggered a security alert to the monitoring service, but for reasons still unclear, the alert was never followed up on. The group entered the home by cutting through the screen on an open window. They made their way to the bedroom where Russell and Rebecca were sleeping. Tony, armed with a weapon, ordered the couple to get up. When the intruders attempted to restrain the Porters with zip ties, Russell unexpectedly resisted, leading to a violent struggle during which he sustained a broken nose and arm. Ultimately, the attackers managed to subdue the couple, tying them up before forcing them out of the house. They were loaded into a pickup truck belonging to the Hicks family and driven to the remote cabin in the woods. Once there, the Porters were executed with single gunshots to the head. The bodies were hastily dumped in the shallow cellar, partially covered with dirt and debris. This chilling account shed light on the fate of Russell and Rebecca Porter, but investigators were left to unravel why these individuals had targeted the couple, and whether more individuals might have been involved. The perpetrators returned to the victim's home after the crime to destroy any evidence that could implicate them and retrieve the computer tower containing footage from the surveillance cameras. These recordings could have captured the suspects and their vehicle. The bedroom was thoroughly cleaned with bleach, which they had brought with them, and the empty bottles were taken away. When Tony was asked why they committed such a heinous crime, he revealed that there had been a client who offered him $100,000 to make the Porters disappear without a trace. Tony admitted he was eager to accept the job but feared he couldn't handle 2 adults on his own. To ensure success, he recruited a team of family members who were all struggling financially. The mysterious client turned out to be Robert Campbell, the uncle who had long coveted the farm left to Russell by his grandfather. Robert provided detailed instructions, including information about the surveillance cameras, and even paid in advance of $20,000. He carefully crafted an alibi, taking his wife on a trip to another city for several days. Investigators later discovered that his wife was aware of his plan. Law enforcement arrested the client and all four participants, charging them with premeditated double homicide, conspiracy, evidence tampering, and perjury. Each suspect tried to minimize their involvement, but none were able to escape justice. In April 2013, 2 years after the brutal crime, Tony and Dusty Hicks were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Tony's wife, Wendy, also received a life sentence. Their son, who had cooperated with investigators and confessed his role in the crime, was sentenced to 13 years in prison. As for Robert Campbell, he adamantly denied his involvement, and much of the evidence against him was circumstantial, leading to delays in his trial. However, in the summer of 2016, the elderly man was finally convicted and sentenced to life in prison. His wife, who had been charged with aiding and abetting as well as perjury, did not live to stand trial. She tragically took her own life shortly after Robert's arrest. Thanks for watching, everyone. Your support means a lot to me, and you can help my channel grow by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, and sharing this video. Your engagement really makes a difference. See you soon.